All right, everyone, we are live. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I'm Don Irvine, joined once again by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, drags, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, and dog-faced pony soldiers.
So, which one of those is your favorite?
Well, I mean, I think you got to hand it to dog-faced pony soldiers just for the creativity, you know. I guess that was a line from a movie.
Yeah, I thought I'd just ask you at the top of my head. Why not? All right. So we're going to spend some time here on this because I think there's a lot to unpack, particularly with Georgia. There is so much stuff going on here. I mean, I have to admit, I think off the top, I did not expect it to get to this level. But I guess I just really underestimated the lying and deceit of the Democrats and the media on this. And it has been incredible. So I'm going to let you just take it away here and give your opinion about everything that you think is going on here with Georgia and the law, et cetera, and then we'll talk some more.
So Georgia passed a law that addressed complaints from both sides. You got to remember that, you know, the election before 2020, you know, Brian Kemp beat Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams still claims she won that election. She lost by more than 50,000 votes. He said because of voting irregularities in Georgia. So, you know, now we've had another election where, you know, people like me think that Trump beat Biden, but now, you know, Biden was awarded the state's electoral votes. So this was a set of fixes to both. It was also addressed things that happened, what to do about things that were implemented on an emergency basis for the 2020 election. For instance, the drop boxes. So you could just come by and drop ballots in a box. I mean, that's, you know, ballot. We generally like watch who puts in and takes stuff out of the ballot boxes, right? So, I mean, to make sure that people aren't dumping in tons of fake ballots or dumping out this and that and the other. So, you know, part of this was fixing that, you know, they moved the ballot boxes inside the voting center itself. So the election officials keep an eye on it. They expanded the number, you know, early voting was, you know, became a big thing in Georgia this year. It never really had been before. So they codified, like, what are we going to do about that? And they expanded the availability and they made changes. Like they said, you know, now the old law said it had to be absent or in-person pre-election day voting had to be available during working hours, business hours. Okay. Well, in some of the rural counties in Georgia, business hours is about 9 to 1, right? They don't have enough traffic coming in to work all day. So the election people are part-time. So this just said, you know, during early voting, you have to be there at least 9 to 5. And, you know, you have the option of going 7 to 7. Okay. I mean, there was a lot of flexibility. There were some bad versions of this bill that went around at first, and the legislature got a hold of them and they said, okay, what in here is really objectionable? What really does restrict voting as opposed to making it more safe and giving it more integrity? And those are things were stripped out. So, you know, and there's also now on absentee ballots, instead of signature match, you have to have an ID. Okay. Oh no, ID, can't afford IDs, right? Well, like 98% of adults have an ID, right? They have a pictured ID. The state allowed you to have any form of state issued ID or, you know, utility bills, whatever, establish who you are, and, you know, things only you could have, right? So, you know, the idea that this put on some requirement that these people couldn't meet is ridiculous. So, you know, the baseball commissioner, he tried to get out in front of it and move the AllStar Game. I guess his concern was if he didn't, you know, players started calling for it, then, he would lose control of the room or whatever, you know, but it was ridiculous. I mean, just stand for what's right and just say, hey, you know, thing one, you know, we like Democrat and Republican baseball fans, right? So we're not messing in politics. We do baseball. That's our business. So, and number two, you know, this law doesn't do what you guys said it did. You know, it doesn't. You know, the Post gave Joe Biden, the Washington Post gave Joe Biden 4 Pinocchios for his statements about this bill, about misrepresenting what was in it. So, you know, you have the president lying about it. his press secretary trying to walk back his remarks and lying about what he said. You have the media lying about what this means for Georgia, and you have people reacting to lies, right? The problem they're running into now is they have moved the game to Colorado, and Colorado's voting rules aren't much different from Georgia's. So it's like you accomplished nothing, but you made a big show, gave in to demands that hadn't been made, and now you look like an idiot. And you moved the game, you deprived these people of the money, and the whole thing's ridiculous. And I think Americans, this story is coming out, and people are looking at these bills and they're saying, what Georgia's done here is there's nothing revolutionary. There's nothing Jim Crow about it, right? The allegations are not true. And even like the liberal media cannot go along with these allegations because they're not accurate. So, you're having people, they're breaking down in places they're not used to breaking down on this.
Well, remember, it's not Jim Crow, it's Jim Eagle now.
Jim Eagle. Yeah. I'm personal
still,
friend of Corn Pop.
Yeah, I am not going to get over that for a long period of time. Now, look, both you and I are, we've been around long enough that we have seen more than our fair share of lying by Democrats, by liberal media, and things like this. But I'm going to have to tell you, in my lifetime, this has to rise right at the top. This is some of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen. I have been seething about this. The misrepresentation of this law is really criminal by this, because to me, one of the things that's going on too, you pointed out several aspects of the law here. It's just that a lot of the criticism really is generated at the proposals, not the final bill, really.
Exactly. That's
right? They've been criticizing things that were discussed, but were not necessarily in the final law. So there was already a narrative in place. The liberal media, they were already ready to go for this. They didn't really care what was going to be in the law in the end. They had enough ammunition from the discussion, from the debate, to say, this is the message, this is the narrative, and this is how we're going to get these guys to roll over and cave into us in our demands. Unbelievable.
Yeah, you're right. The narrative of this was planned before it passed, right? And it was, we're going to try to sack this. And the reason is like the things where the Trump people say the corruption entered the system in Georgia was part of what was directly addressed with this. Signature ballots where there was no signature at all, or 9,500 in a row looked exactly the same. The collection boxes where ballots were dumped and so forth. It also does a bunch of stuff that addresses when votes are counted and what must be reported to make sure that, we all know, there's this many votes that have been cast and these other votes that are going to be counted. And, they make you report that every day. Here's where we stand. Here's how many votes. So in other words, if I have an election and there's 10,000 votes at the polls and you're telling me there's 5,000 early absentee whatever votes, okay, then if we end up with a thing that's 28,000 votes, right, and we know there's only 15,000 in the universe, we can tell that something funky happened there and go back and look at it. So these were good reforms, and there was nothing racist about it, and there was no attempt to block people out. I mean, if you're whoever's going to pass voting reform, right, is you're going to face the accusation that you did it to favor your own party. If you can prove that it favors the party, then hey, let's look at that reform, right? But I don't think there's a reform in here that you can make serious argument about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, considering how the proposals kind of, when we went from what we were hearing about what was going to be, what they were debating versus how it wound up in its final form, not to me, there's not a lot that the opposition really should be complaining about on this. I mean, 17 days of early voting. Not a lot of states allow that much early voting. I mean, Governor Kemp pointed out, I think was New York has 9 or 10. I think New Jersey's got about 9.
Yeah.
You mentioned Colorado. I think they have 15, but still less than Georgia. And this ID thing has just been, this is so nuts. Okay. So Georgia passed, I think it was Governor Perdue signed the voter ID legislation into effect in 2005. Okay. When you go in-person voting, you got to present ID.
Right.
Voting in Georgia has increased and not decreased in that period of time. All right,
Right.
which is always which is always the argument from the liberal left, from the Democrats. It's like, oh, this is voter suppression and things like that. But they can't argue the fact that the statistics say that voting has increased in Georgia. So that argument just doesn't go anywhere with me. As far as the ID, you talked about the signatures, right? Signatures were a problem, as you have mentioned, with all of this. It's also a very subjective type of thing.
Exactly.
You're trying to match a signature, that's on there. People, that's a judgment call.
Right. It's one that you shouldn't be asking your fellow citizens to make.
Right. Right. So
it's just some volunteer who's got to do like 6,000 of those, and you shouldn't be asking them to do that.
Right. No, absolutely. And so the ID thing, so Georgia, they accept like 6 different types of ID, and they provide you a free ID if you want it. So, they have not set the bar too high here. If you've got a driver's license, fine. But one of the things I think, how much more simple can it be? Most people have a social security number. Last 4 digits of your social security number. That seems a pretty low bar to cross.
Yeah. If you can't do that, and the other thing that gets me is like, okay, let's say it costs $10 to get an ID. Okay. Well, yeah, some people are richer than others. Some people, $10 hurts a little bit, right? But if voting is your priority, then, save the $10, right? That's not a ton of money.
Yeah,
right? It's just not anymore.
Right. I think Georgia.
Then you got to go and apply for it. Well, all the other people who are voting went and applied for it. Why should you get an exception? Why? Oh, everybody else has to go sit at DMV, but not you. You're special. You get to just get your license for your vote for nothing, right? I don't understand that. I don't get that.
Yeah, well, the complaints for years, it's not just in Georgia, I think in Mississippi and other states, where they said they wanted ID. And I think the count is like 36 states require some form of ID to vote, either by mail or in person. So this is not exactly like they were the outlier here at all, right? If we're talking 72% of the states are doing this, then this is not Maryland is one state that doesn't require it. You can't do it. So we're in the Maryland, we're in the minority. You can't present an ID, to vote. That's not legal. So, trying to, the governor here, and just as well as the governors, I think in a lot of other states, the state legislature, they're talking about voter integrity. We have a problem with technology and all these other issues. The opportunity to mess up these things, to defraud and really burrow into the system and create havoc within the voting system, it's out there. So you can't. I don't think you can ever really make it 100% foolproof necessarily, but you can put efforts in place to say we're trying to make sure that it is as good as we can make it, considering all the factors that are involved. And so I think Georgia's done it, but Georgia's has become this lightning rod. So, but what you have, on what MLB has done here. Who are they hurting? They're hurting businesses. They're hurting the everyday worker, the people that are supposed to be the Joe Biden, base kind of a thing like this. I think Stacey Abrams and John Ossoff have said this is, they don't agree with the law per se, but they definitely don't agree with the action.
Like, whoops, we didn't mean for this, guys.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, you did, because you encouraged it. You told them, it's great that these athletes are speaking up and making their voice heard and taking their place in the debates of society. I would argue just the opposite. I would argue that you have the same right to speak as I do if you're an athlete or whatever. But saying, hey, the athletes get an outsized voice in this. Let's all consult them before we make up our mind. That's nonsense, right? What we love them for, what we watch them for, doesn't have anything to do with their opinion on public policy, right? And their opinion, I would argue, is not all that well informed. A lot of them jumped on this because Biden said it was Jim Crow and all this stuff.
Right, and Biden he lends his word that in essence he kind of encourages MLB to pull the game out of Atlanta, right? So with that, I mean, Rob Manfred is now he's starting to like, okay, what am I supposed to be doing here? Who do I stand up for? Well, he really ought to be standing up for principle here, but there's no backbone here with these guys, unfortunately. I mean, the Braves players, I mean, I think their initial reaction, I think they were slightly dumbfounded by all of this, right? I mean, they were caught off guard. This was, one of the tragedies about this, and sports writers have talked about it, you all know about it too, it's just that this game was also going to be honoring Hank Aaron,
right.
One of the greatest baseball players ever, and he passed away. Right in the town where he played baseball for so many years, and then to yank this away. I mean, this is a slap in the face
and from Mobile, so from that area too.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is all part of it. I mean, you weren't going to have an all-star game in Mobile, right? So,
right. And in fact, Mobile lost its minor league team in the reshuffling. We were one of the cities that got shut out. But in fact, they did this. The thing that bothers me about this is Biden. He has this tendency to just like we talked about. People said, will you name a woman vice president? Every politician knows, well, I'm going to certainly consider women. And, they have their place at the table. We'll see. Right. He's like, yeah, I will. Okay. What about a woman of color? Yeah, I will. Okay. So you're down to about, 7 or 8% of the population. We're the only ones eligible to be vice president under Biden because he said that. They asked him, are you going to cancel domestic energy production? He said, yeah, no more. Day one, I'm stopping domestic energy production. It turns out, it's later been interpreted to mean, federal lands, right? Which does make a big difference in the United States, where we do use a lot of federal lands, and the federal government makes a lot of money off of this. Which, some would argue that when you're spending $2-3 trillion on these bills, that little oil money might not be a bad thing to offset it, but they don't seem to care about that kind of stuff. But this is another thing where someone just asked him a question and he just went hog wild in answering the question, and then had to follow through, with this other stuff, which caused other people to take actions that they wouldn't. And Rob Manfred, he's the same way. He's, blown about by the wind, and he's like got into this thing. He's like, oh well, other people might get mad at me if I don't do this. So what gets the right people and wrong people mad at me? Which can I handle better or whatever, and he's been an awful commissioner anyway. And maybe this will be the time when baseball looks at him and says, enough of your incompetence.
Yeah, well, baseball owners really need to take a look at Manfred. I don't know when his contract is up, but boy, I tell you,
he's as bad a sports commissioner as I have ever seen. He's just awful.
Yeah, it's been pretty bad with it. And Manfred is, I mean, he's no better than these woke CEOs, particularly, Delta and the Coke CEO coming out and against this law and, making all these machinations and talking about what they're going to do and all this kind of stuff. I don't believe for a minute that any of these CEOs, including, and they're part of, they're the other ones that are part of that group. I think it was like 72 black CEOs across the country, came out against this. I don't think any of them read it. I think they did exactly what most other people did, and Manfred included, which is that they read the tea leaves of what the media and the liberals, how they had labeled it. And they said, okay, fine. And they did. They kind of hold up your finger to the wind. You kind of alluded to that with Manfred, and which way does it go? But in the meantime, I mean, Coca-Cola, Delta, all these other corporations, like, all right, so which constituency are you engaging here? And are you doing the job you're supposed to be doing for the shareholders? Is what you're saying going out and all this activism on this kind of issue, is that in the shareholders' best interest?
That's right. Yeah, because you're going to take some hits on this. Coca-Cola, Delta, Merck, but especially Coca-Cola and Delta are going to take some hits because, I don't know about you, but my whole timeline is people swearing to never drink Coke or fly Delta again. A lot of them they'll relent after a while. They'll cool down. Something else will make them mad or whatever. But, you're going to lose some money in the short term about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're going to get some attaboys from the liberal left, but that doesn't necessarily translate to higher sales. I think you stand a chance to lose more sales from those that you alienate, the conservatives, even if it's for the short term. There'll be some pain points here.
Yeah, and Someone needs to ask these guys, these CEOs, Rob Manfred, the Coke guy, the Delta guy, what part of the bill do you object to? What provisions did you find unacceptable and why? Because they can't tell you. They have no idea. They haven't read it. They don't understand it. They made no effort to understand it. And the Coke guy, he had a very telling quote. He talked about, how he had come to the decision to do this, and it was by talking to affected groups. So in other words, you never considered the right or wrong of this. You considered only who was pressuring you. Okay, so the pressure needs to come from both sides.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just, I think it was, is her name Cecilia Rouse, from the Council of Economic Advisors for Biden? Mm-hmm. I mean, she talked about, she said had some quote about the law that, it kind of admitting that it was going to hurt businesses, but it was the right thing to do. But once again, I thought Joe was all for the working class guy. I mean, he's taken they're taking a direct hit in Atlanta as a result of this, and that doesn't bode well for them.
Yeah, you move from a city that's 60% black to a city that's 4% black. Thank you for helping the black people with your brave move.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I was talking to a guy yesterday, and he was saying that, yeah, he ran through some stats about the comparison between Atlanta and Colorado and Denver in terms of the population, all the diversity. Atlanta, you just from a group of people that were your part of your base core support, you have taken that game away and all the money that it involves and moved it to a city that is, majority white, heavily white, and everything is, and where the laws are not, as you said, all that much different.
Yeah, to teach those poor people in Atlanta about, racism.
Yeah.
Give them a lesson they won't forget.
That's right. Yeah, Bob has
racism.
Bob's jumped in here, and he on this thing here too. He says extraordinarily foolish decision by MLB in every way, no justification whatsoever.
I think he's right.
Yeah. Look, I mean, neither one of us, and I think want to see these sports get into politics, because it's suicide. It's a no-win situation for them. We watch sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, whatever. We watch it for the pure enjoyment. We want to see we want to see these people play and the enjoyment of the game, and whether or not it's college or pro. But when they start getting into politics, boy, it becomes a total turnoff, and you begin to wonder what the heck's going on here.
And if it was interesting, it would be different. But it's not interesting. It's people who don't do any research, don't think about these things, popping off based on loaded garbage they've heard on TV.
Right.
They're uninformed, and the voice that they're getting, it's hear their powerful voice, is uninformed and not responsive and doesn't understand second order consequences of actions at all. So it'd be one thing if you could, if you had some other athletes saying, hey, this is dumb for these 5 reasons, then that debate would be worth listening to. But now it seems programmed and affected, and it doesn't sway anybody. No one's changing their mind on any of this stuff because some athlete said something.
Right, and they're lauded, for their activism, whether on social justice, and all these issues, right? Yeah. But this thought popped into my mind as going through this discussion. I seem to recall there was a pitcher for the San Diego Padres back in the 80s, maybe. I think his name was Eric Xiao. I mean, he came out. I mean, he said he made some comments about conservatism and things like that, or something related to that. And he got pilloried for that. I mean, he was expressing some opinion. Maybe he shouldn't have done it. I don't know that. But, he expresses an opinion that's conservative, and people piled on, right? And now it's like you have to express the liberal opinion, otherwise you will get attacked. But I mean, a lot of those baseball players, a lot of sports guys, they realize, athletes, they said, nah, we're not going to go down that. I mean, privately we can express that, and then that's fine with our friends, and that's how we should keep it. And I think that a lot of it, but also if they would articulate something that was an intelligent position that wasn't crafted by the mob, in essence, right, I'm willing to listen to them. But that's not what's happened.
That's not what's happened
at all. All right, and we this will probably continue to come up because I don't think this is going away anytime soon necessarily. I do want to ask you, well, actually, as part of this too, I did a couple things too. I should say here too, in terms of, we still have the Masters that's starting in Augusta, and there was some people that came out and said, "Hey, Commissioner Manford, what about your membership in Augusta?"
I gotta say that Marco Rubio came out and said, how can you, if you hate what Georgia's done so much, how can you stay a member of this Georgia's most prominent golf club? And I think he's right. How can you do that? It goes against your morals and everything you stand for. Because there's no political pressure on him to drop out of Augusta, right? There was political pressure, from leftists to do this, and it's like, oh, I can't take the pressure. But this he doesn't feel as much heat for it. He should.
Yeah, and
there's also talk of canceling it or moving it, and it's like the Masters is Augusta. Right?
Yeah.
Just go play at Joe's golf course somewhere. I mean, it's the test is come to that golf course and play that golf course 4 times. So it will not be moved, and it will not be suspended, put off, or anything like that. They are ready for that. They were ready for Martha Burke, and they will be ready for these guys.
Yeah, the Masters. I mean, it's one of those things that there are certain things, in sports where this is where it's located, right? I mean, and that's it. The Masters is known there. There are a few other golf events that they do rotate some of the majors, that they rotate the golf courses, but it's still a very small number. It's only like 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it is, that they rotate around. But the Masters, I mean, can you imagine trying to move the Masters and play the Masters anywhere else? I can't.
It's not the Masters.
No,
you can call it Joe's golf tournament, but it's not the Masters.
Yeah. No, and Biden has said it's up to them as to what they want to do. Once again, chiming in.
Yeah, right. So on Atlanta, they should move that game. This is terrible. On the Masters, it's like, they should make their decision and think hard, and it's like, okay, what is the difference, Joe, in this situation from this perspective? What's the difference between the Masters and the AllStar Game? They're both big sporting events in Georgia. Getting them postponed, moved, canceled, whatever, makes your big event, makes your big news headline that you're looking for here, right? Oh, passing this bill has cost Georgia this stuff, right? So, what is the difference? Why that perspective on the Masters and this one on the AllStar Game? And you know what Psaki's answer to that was? That's not what he said. He didn't say move the AllStar Game. So, yeah, he did. You liar. It was like, we saw it. Here's the receipt. So I don't know what they're going to do. I also don't know I'm beginning to wonder about how long they're going to go with her, because, I mean, she gets brutally pummeled every day, right? And that's by the friendly, she won't even call him the Fox guy anymore. And, I don't know how long he can take those beatings, because it's embarrassing to the administration as well as the country.
Yeah, I mean, being the press secretary for the president is inevitably going to be a tough job to begin with, but it's much tougher when your president isn't telling the truth, and then you're trying to find a way to get around that and cover that up or deny that, when there's things on the record that show exactly the opposite. So, Biden has not helped Psaki at all, with this. And and not that she's a great press secretary to begin with, because neither you or I are very impressed with her to begin with, anyway. So, right. And I know Bob isn't impressed with her out there either. But what about one more thing too about this? What about the 2022 Olympics in Beijing? Because that's also been brought in. If you're going to talk about voting and democracy or whatever,
human rights,
communist China, come on.
Yeah. I mean, I'm over the Olympic movement entirely. Cancel the whole thing and be fine by me. It's what they founded it to do. It's never really done, right? In fact, it's closer. It's done closer to the opposite of what they invented it to do. Whatever. I don't think we'll do that, because I don't think we have the moral wherewithal in the country right now with the current administration, what do we morally stand for as Americans? What are we really for? Because China's just someone else to make a deal with for Biden, right? So the moral implications of what they're doing, he won't even bring it up. He hasn't even talked to Z about any of this stuff,
Right. And the Olympics are becoming very politicized, and some of the other things too. It's that, when they add new sports in and drop sports, and I'm going to have to say sports, because there are some things they throw in there and you're like, how is that a sport? By the
right.
definition.
How is biathlon, okay, skiing and shooting? You're diving down a ski chute, shooting a gun. Like, why is that in the Olympics?
Yeah, but they do things. I mean, I think that depending upon what it is, they've put in. They've had things like things that are akin to break dancing and other things, and you're like, yeah, I don't remember a national break dancing league or something.
Synchronized dance in the pool. It's like it's pretty to watch, I guess, but that's not an Olympics. I would like to see.
You're showing some real bias against some of these sports.
We're
gonna get some hate from some swimmers.
Hate mail, like misogynist. It's like, I don't mean because it's we can kill the men's sports. But I think I would be for, if you're going to do the Olympics, as things that there's really no better way to find out who's the best in the world at it. Like, who's the fastest person in the world? Okay, that's worthwhile. Let's have a track meet and run those track meets. Run it worldwide. Let it, a world championship of track, a world championship of swimming races, right? So we really know who's the best 400 freestyle swimmer in the world, right? That's really the only way to get that out of competition. So, I'm for that. But we've gotten into, I love baseball, but why is baseball in the Olympics? That's not an Olympic sport. They had golf in there. Golf is not an Olympic sport. Golf does settle who's the best people in the world. They keep relentless score of who they have world rankings and points and so forth. That golf, and when you go to the Olympics, you put a sport like that in the Olympics, you're not getting the best players from every country. You're getting who's available and willing to do it, right? So, I mean, maybe that's a movement whose time has come and gone.
Yeah, I mean, especially, some of these things you kind of wonder about just because, like the Summer Olympics, you put some of these sports in, you're also interfering with the pro circuit and their schedules, right? So that's why you will not get the best athletes, for a lot of these things, because they're now having to take the time off of it. They're now saying, do I play and get the honor of potentially winning the gold medal or whatever, for the Olympics and having that in my collection? Or do I continue to do something which is paying me, and paying my salary and, and all of these other things? And do I risk injury in something like that? I mean, there's a lot of, there's so many factors to all this. One more thing here that is just kind of come across my mind, which I think that the Olympics is going to have to watch out for, because I think it's inevitable, is this whole transgender issue.
Yeah.
I think this is going to come up at some point in time. And I think this is going to roil the Olympics, because they will have to make a decision about who they allow in and how they allow them to compete.
What is gender and how do we determine it, and all that?
Yeah, I mean, do you start having males that now identify as females racing now in the women's track things? They push. This is a can of worms. I don't I hope that I think is inevitable, but it's going to be real. It's going to be terrible for the Olympics, and I think that's. And they're already, under COVID, they're already having problems. I mean, they're going to go ahead in Japan, but no international visitors. And I don't know. I don't
not an Olympics,
No. I mean, this could be kind of the beginning of the end of how the Olympics are as we have known them for a long time.
Yeah. And the thing about Japan is it cost an enormous amount of money to stage this, right? Yeah. So Japan has to eat all the expenses of staging it, and they get very few of the benefits of holding it, right? They don't get the big crowds. They don't get the hotels full and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, in a COVID world, even with vaccinations, I mean, there are going to be people who are not going to be willing to travel for whatever reason. what happens to hosting cities down the line as they start awarding, as they go through those rounds? Do some of those cities still want to take the chance and host, and bid for that and lay out an enormous amount of money? What if they're not really, convinced that they're going to be able to get the same kind of crowds and make the kind of money and earn that back? This is going to be very interesting to see what the future of the Olympics is, even on a financial basis going down. Yeah. All right. Enough of that. I do want to ask you about this whole thing that is just going around like crazy, which is 60 Minutes and Ron DeSantis. Okay, I'm going to have to say one thing about this at the beginning, is that 60 Minutes made a huge mistake on taking on Ron DeSantis. Wrong guy to go and take on. I mean, unbelievable. Go ahead and explain.
So he was interviewed about how Publix, which is a grocery store chain, which there's one every 10 feet in Florida. They're not that big like here. I don't think there's any here. There's some in Virginia, downstate Virginia, but not in this part of Virginia. Came to be one of the vaccine distributors. And they had, and the reporter asked him, and he said, well, CBS and whoever else he said, they were doing some other aspect of this and were not able to turn around and switch to this in time, right? And so they said, don't pass us by. So the people, the big time local providers that he had been using, he could not use. So then he asked the health officials, and he's explaining all this to the reporter. He asked all the health officials, who can do this? He asked companies to step up. He asked Publix, which had tried to be involved in the first round of this. And they said, yeah, we're set up. We can help it. So they gave it to Publix. So DeSantis, when he ran for governor, Publix contributed to his opponent. And once he won, the big corporations, they can't have you hating them, right? They're going, well, there are some things we can do to help you too, So they gave him $100,000, apparently. $100,000 does not buy you a governor anymore. That maybe used to, but they're a little higher price nowadays. And so 60 Minutes tried to make a big deal, but yeah, this guy gave you $100,000, and he's like, no, I just explained to you, that's a false narrative. That's not what happened. So when they run this on 60 Minutes, where he explained the whole part that I said first about, why, how Publix ended up with it, and how he asked all these other people, and how he got advice from the providers and the customers, and before he made the decision, and that it wasn't just given to his buddy who gave him $100,000, but this was, when people asked him what to do, this is what the answer that came back was. All that was blotted out of the answer. So it just looks like he's blowing off her question, without ever having provided an explanation of what was going on. So, I don't know. I think that this was a massive problem for 60 Minutes, because it's pretty clear that it's a hit job. It's pretty clear that the facts in this are on his side. And, you even have Democrats down in Florida saying, there's a lot to criticize about DeSantis, but this is not it, So
I mean, I think it was the mayor of Palm Beach or something like that. I think it was on Fox, and he just said wrong. He says, look, DeSantis talked to us about this whole thing and about, about the vaccination and the distribution and everything like that. And so, when you have Florida Democrats who are not big fans of DeSantis per se coming out against 60 Minutes, that says something. And in 60 Minutes, they just doubled down. They say, we edited it for clarity and all these kind of things. I'm hoping that this kind of helps blow the lid off what happens with programs like 60 Minutes. I mean, I've been around and I've seen a lot of stuff with 60 Minutes. AIM had a lot of involvement in going after 60 Minutes, really for the last 50 years, but mostly probably in the first 30 plus years of its existence. And one of the things, I learned early on, dealing with people who'd been defamed in essence, was just that, yeah, you may see 15 to 18 minutes on air, but they have easily shot, an hour's worth or more of footage. There is a lot of things that are left out there. One of the most famous incidences of how this was brought home to me was after, during the whole 3 Mile Island time frame, they went after Illinois Power, which had nuclear power plants in Illinois. And they went after them and just bashed them to holy heavens, just about on all this stuff. And so, they were smart. They were the smartest people I'd ever met, and they recorded side by side everything 60 Minutes did. They waited for 60 Minutes to come out and air their piece, became the hit piece they expected, and then they created their own piece with side by side comparison. Here's what you saw. Here's what you didn't see. Totally blew 60 Minutes out of the water, showing how the editing was just changed the context. And that's right. And this is what is happening. And hopefully, hopefully we can bring that to the fore and say, look, for those of you that believe 60 Minutes before, this is don't. You can't trust these guys at all.
Yeah, you can't.
All right, Bob has come in here, says the propagandists of 60 Minutes even further out in left field than usual on this one. And that's right. I mean, I think Bob's right on that too, is that they went a step too far. They've doubled down on this, and you have lots of people, including liberals, who are not buying it. They're scratching their heads. You edited it for clarity. And it looks like actually you edited to achieve a certain narrative. That's really what it boils down to, right? With all of this. All right. I want to talk a little bit more about this Biden and his infrastructure bill. About $2.3 trillion. He talking about jobs and infrastructure. A lot of complaints from Republicans and conservatives that traditionally infrastructure, we've considered to be roads and bridges. You can throw a few more things in there, on top of that if you want to. But he's really broad the definition of what infrastructure is. There is a lot of stuff in there that that he is just feeding the beast here, and it's going to be, he wants to pay for it with higher corporate taxes, with even Janet Yellen from the Fed saying there ought to be like a global minimum tax. We're raising taxes when countries are lowering taxes. We're going in the wrong direction here.
Right. That this has been hijacked. This is their Green New Deal gambit. And I think, you're seeing some people sort of recognize that. I believe Senator Manchin has come out against this. I think Senator Sinema has come out against this or raised some concerns. I'm not sure she's totally in the no camp yet, but two Democrat senators. So you can't, it doesn't matter about they've gotten the parliamentarian to say they could do this whole thing through reconciliation, but reconciliation requires 50 votes. And right now they don't have them. So, and I think the nature of Manchin's objections, I don't think they can get there with him. I think they're going to have to deal with him being a nut. So I don't really know. This may not go very far. Same thing with H.R. 1. I don't think it goes very far. I don't think that they can keep all those Democrats. I think that Senator Sinema has some concerns about that one too. And I don't think they can keep all the rest of them in line for it. So, all this stuff can pass the House, but what's happening is our constitutional system is working. The Senate's the cooling saucer. The House passes every fad bill that comes along, every liberal wish list that they think up, and then the Senate says, "Hey, whoa, that's a lot of money to spend for dumb things," and they slow these things down. So hopefully you can keep this bottled up until 2022. And make it go away. But we do need, and one of the things that I criticize the Trump administration for is an actual infrastructure package, actual spend money on roads and bridges, because the roads and bridges themselves need the help. School buildings, there are a lot of kids going to school and school buildings that need help. I know people are going to say, it's a state local responsibility, and it is. Okay, but if you want to try your Keynesian experiment for the 448th time after the first 447 failed. That's a worthwhile place to park some of the money, right? So waterworks, lakes, dams, water systems, aqueducts all over the country that need repair, need updating. Do that. Make it really waterworks. Make it really infrastructure. And then the price tag. There's not going to be a lot of political hay to be made about the price tag, right? The price tag is going to be, whatever they say it is pretty much, and we'll just print the money to make it happen and so forth, which is basically what we're doing anyway. But that's something that would be you could start showing by 2022 if you're a Democrat, hey, we're actually fixing stuff in your world, right? We're actually making your life a little better here with something that the Republicans oppose. That hasn't happened yet. They're staking their hope along those lines on the last COVID bill. It's like, hey, every Republican voted against sending you that $1,400 check. Don't forget. But it's like, I don't think there's, I don't think by the time that happened and in the way it happened, they get a lot of political advantage out of that anymore. I think that, they're pretty much not going to get political advantage of it. Almost as many people think that was completely wasteful and unnecessary as thought it was a good idea by the time it happened. So, I think they're kind of stuck with this and they've got to pursue it, but I don't think they can get the votes.
Yeah. As you have said, I mean, the thing about it, generally, most real true infrastructure plans, if you're talking about roads and bridges and dams and things like that, you will get bipartisan support for that because every state has a need. There has been the states, have rated their transportation trust funds so much to pay for other things that they're pretty much empty. And if I don't have a problem, particularly if it's, if we give them a massive infusion and say, look, this money is going to go for these specific projects to repair and rebuild, because the neglect for all of this has meant that the price tag has gone way, way up because we haven't done it. And we don't want unsafe roads. We don't want unsafe bridges. I mean, I'm still thinking about the bridges that collapsed, I think, in Minnesota. This is going to continue to happen if we're going to neglect all of these things. So we've got to do that. I would much rather see these fixes go into place than worry about getting, 500,000 electric charging stations.
Right. Because that's not nearly enough. And then you have to have the electricity for those. The other thing is getting ignored about, and the people who make these things and follow these issues keep saying this. Right? They say, you can change all the cars to electric, but we don't have enough electric to supply that. We're already, we've added 40% in the last 5 years on our devices, right? I mean, we're now powering all these phones and computers and iPads, and every school kid in the country now is on a computer. They're not in the classroom anymore. So all that power is getting pumped out, right? That's not without cost. But it's like, oh no, we're going to change all this because, these guys, they don't care if it's true, what they say is true. And they don't, and this runs through everything that happens with them. Foreign policy, border policy, welfare policy, this kind of stuff, emergency management, energy policy. There's no thought of second order circumstances. There's no, if I do this, it'll cause that to happen. They don't get that. Biden still doesn't understand why people keep showing up at the border, and like what is the connection between his policies and this surge, right? This didn't happen out of nowhere. I mean, these guys, they did this. They're doing this for a reason, and it's the reasons all come from our side.
Yeah, I mean, also when you mentioned schools too, I just want to say one before I move on to the last piece of red meat for you here is, I actually thought about maybe the feds ought to go in there and give these localities some money for, kind of just retrofitting their ventilation systems, right, and bringing those up because that's one of the things about the teachers, right? The teachers' complaints is a poor ventilation system. They have all these. You take away all these excuses, and the teachers will have no reason not to return to the classroom.
Right, and I also am fine with the federal government buying hand sanitizer by the freaking shipload and just making sure it's everywhere.
That was ship with a P.
P, that's right. A full ship.
Just in case people misunderstand things.
Yeah. No, we don't say any bad words on here.
Yeah.
It's possible a kid will watch. I don't know why they would, but they might.
Jill just mentioned also the time it'll take to recharge versus filling up with gasoline. Because if anybody's ever recharged an electric vehicle, you are sitting there for a while, right? I mean,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, the golf course across the street just changed to gas carts, which I never thought they'd be able to get because Reston's a super NIMBY town, right? Yeah. But they did, and it's because the as a result of the pandemic, their membership has really grown. There's golf has really taken off, and they have these electric carts, and they couldn't keep enough charge, right? So you have people standing there with no cart. You have 10 carts down in the tunnel getting charged.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah,
that's a great story. I love it. All right, real quick, I know I'm just serving this up for you. Hunter Biden and his laptop in his interview.
Well, so anybody who's ever been a druggie, they you can identify with that crawling around the carpet, looking if there's one more down there, and every once in a while you find one, and it keeps you looking. But I mean, what he's telling you, his accounts of junkie behavior, it looks like the junkies I've known. So you're talking about a guy who was a real, and I don't know. I don't know if "was" is the appropriate word, because I don't know what the evidence is that, he's not anymore, but was a complete crackhead and got other people to do it with him. He apparently went to the brother who passed on, went to his wife and got her smoking crack, which, like, to get someone addicted to a drug, strikes me as, that's one of the worser things you can do as a person, right? Is to it cause someone to be addicted. So I don't know. I don't know. And I don't know how, if that part of this is true, all the other stuff is not true, right? And apparently the FBI has, mislocated the laptop. So, they're obviously not.
In this interview, he said he could not say definitively that it wasn't his laptop in that repair shop, right?
Yeah. He says he doesn't remember dropping it off, which I don't know. I mean,
that I thought was interesting, because it's like, look, I mean, if you want to try to end this controversy, you just say, no, it's not my laptop. I never was there and whatever, but you just left that door open to me. I don't know. Yeah. It's just very strange. All right. Final thoughts. 2 minutes.
Final thought. Let's see what over here we had. It looks like vaccination passports will not happen. It looks like the president has walked that back. States were up against it. I thought it had commerce clause problems. I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but it didn't look to me like, the punishments they were contemplating for this could be legally carried out. So I think that's a good thing. I also am not sure, and would love to have an answer to this question. Why are people who are, and I also saw that Australia or somewhere, they're saying a thing that says you've had the vaccine or that you've recovered from COVID. You had it and you've recovered. And I don't understand why we can't make that change in this country. And the people like me who've had it probably don't need a vaccine. We certainly can be the very, very back of the line and let everybody else get one first, right? Because we're really not vulnerable to it at all. And I hear this about the variants, but no one who has had it has come down with a variant yet. So, I think immunity is immunity, but I'm not a doctor or a lawyer, so take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, I think it's going to take me when I get up one of these days at 4 a.m. to go to the Maryland Go Vac site and see if one of the local places, the Giant or the CVS or the Safeway's got it. Because every time I try in the middle of the day, which is when I usually remember, there's nothing available. But I have pre-registered for the Maryland Go Vac site because they're going to set one up. I don't know, 10 miles away up at the Montgomery College. If it's by appointment, that's probably not bad. I am not going to do what they did in Hagerstown, where they opened it up to a walk-in and people were waiting 7 hours or whatever, and it was a disaster. I am not so desperate to get this vaccine. I'm going to go through that nonsense at this point, and things. So, but we have a probable Utah wedding in August, so I think just for everybody's sake, we want to make sure we get vaccinated before then.
So it's moved into probable?
Well,
it's possible last week. I'm just trying to follow.
Is that what I said last week? Yeah, well, I mean, let's put it to you this way. There's no date set, but there was the call about, so Mom and Dad, are you gonna pay for our honeymoon?
Needed to know that up front, huh?
Yeah. So it's pretty funny. I mean, I love him to death. I love how he's thinking about how are we going to actually manage to pull this off.
Now, is he trying to get married in the big temple?
They're going to. Well, the Salt Lake Temple is closed because it's in the midst of a 4-year renovation project. So there's another temple that's in Bountiful, Utah, which is north of Salt Lake, and that's where they're scheduling it.
Oh, okay.
And by then, everything should be close to normal. We were told that I think masks will no longer be mandatory in Utah after the 15th. I don't know if the stores will still mandate it, but
right.
But at least the state will say no more and things like that, which will send the liberals into a tizzy again and everything.
Now, does this temple does it have the same kind of like waiting list as the big one? Because my understanding is you have 15 minutes to get in there and get married and get out.
In Salt Lake, it wasn't quite. It depended upon the day and things. Saturdays were always Saturdays are really booked day. I've been to the temple for when my niece got married there, and it moves fairly. They try to move you through fairly quickly, but there are certain things that are going to take time. I mean, really, by the time from the start, the wedding ceremony itself is very short. It's actually just getting everybody together and then getting them to take you to the room and some of the other things, get everybody seated and whatnot and all of these things. So that's usually what's the time-consuming part of it. But they process a lot of people in Salt Lake. Actually, a very popular temple is where Spencer got married and my nephew got married, which is in Gilbert, Arizona. It's one of the newer ones. It's in a growing area. It's beautiful. It's just set. The whole setting is gorgeous. And so everybody wants to be there. But if you're going to be in Arizona and you're going to get married any time of the year, you want to do it in the morning.
Yeah, that's right.
So you try to get the 9 o'clock slot if you can, or 8 o'clock, whatever the earliest slot is, because you don't want to be there at 1 o'clock.
No, it's the only time of day you can breathe is early in the morning.
So, Jill says there's a temple in Houston, no mask mandate.
Oh wow!
So I didn't.
There you go.
I'll have to double check all that. Anyway, so that's it, folks. Thank you for joining us today. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. God bless America, and we will see you again next week.